what I'm interested about is how you take like a small topic like sensitivity or like the golden rule and the process of moving that small topic into like a whole story with lots of different bits of context that come together and then eventually like for the sensitivity one put a positive spin at the end and create this whole new meaning. So yeah,
Mm.
talk to me about your process.
So as a writer, it's interesting because I've always been more of a long form poet. My Traditionally when I perform live, my poems can be up to like 10 minutes long, because they are usually these sprawling tangential stories that like take different perspectives or follow a character. But when I started to put my stuff online more, I felt like I wanted to be able to speak across across lots of different types of um, backgrounds and connect. And I think giving myself the challenge to turn like what feels to me like such an all-consuming um, topic, such as like the sensitivity of our brains, into something that's like 1 minute long, meant that I have to be super economical about the language and also allow room for people to interpret in whatever way they want. So rather than being super specific about what I'm referring to when I talk about um, like the tapestry of brains in our society, I just leave that statement there to be kind of unpicked by the listener, but hopefully with enough connection that it can sort of transcend different backgrounds, different thought processes. But that's definitely taken me a while with my process, because I basically started with story. When I started writing, it was much more about the story, the personal, and then more recently I've started to use my personal experience to expand into the universal. But it had to come from, I guess, a sort of self-knowledge and a like understanding of my own sensitive brain and what that feels like, and how I can then speak across and kind of reach a hand through these like 1 minute poems, I guess. Yeah.
And when you're like developing an idea, does it start with like a message that you want to share, or does it start with a specific bit of imagery that's really caught you, that's sort of just bubbled up into the surface of your mind, or is it a combination of those things, or something completely different? Like, what's usually the starting point, and then do you just like ramble of whatever sort of you use that creative flow and that sort of inspiration from that muse and note it all down and then kind of
Mm.
form it into some sort of structure and story? What's the like stage process like? And start with the sort of initial starting point. What's that? What ignites the fire first?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like such an elusive um, process, I think, for artists to know where it begins, because we're constantly, as like a self-professed sensitive person, taking things in and getting inspiration from like the books I read, the films I watch, the reality TV, everything, the conversations I have with people. Um, but a lot of the time, what I'll do is I'll write down a seed of a thought, like a little, maybe one line, and it'll usually be something that I'll have been thinking about anyway. And then I'll be trying to piece together a narrative from what often feels like quite a huge, expansive topic, and I'll be trying to go at it like precisely, like they say sometimes, like go in at slant. So rather than looking at a topic like face on, you have like another directive in, and yeah, it's a gathering, like what you said about just writing and writing and writing. A lot of it for me is like sort of subconscious writing. I try not to like sit down and type things out. I don't give myself time for that. I usually like put it in my notes app, write it in a notebook. A lot of the time when I used to work in pubs, I would write, because I was doing like a monotonous task. Probably should have been paying more attention to like serving pints, but because it was like doing something slightly dull meant that I was kind of allowing my creativity to just wander rather than having to sit down and focus on being creative, which I think never for me doesn't really work. But yeah, the seed then germinates into this like other. I start writing down more, and then sometimes what's been quite good about putting my stuff online is then I have this challenge to be like, I want to talk about my inner child. What pieces of writing do I have that I can then condense and refine and extract to try and say this in the way that feels still true to me, but also can connect across people who don't have 10 minutes with me, and I don't have time to talk to them. It's like, how can I kind of punctuate people's timelines? That's what people are seeing it on. That is going to have. It's not about having a kind of virality impact, but it's having a thing that people can watch that's like, oh fuck, I see myself in that. And yeah, so it starts off of, a lot of the time when I write, it's like a wee thing that I'll have noted down, and then I won't come back to it for, like, I'll maybe come back to it in 2 weeks when I don't even I don't know if you get that, where you've written something and then you forget, and then you read it almost as like an objective viewer, because you're like, I have no recollection of writing that. That's actually quite good, or that's shit, or something. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast. Sorry.
Yeah, you're
Swearing
fine.
okay? Okay. Yeah, so it's quite like a sometimes convoluted process, but I think it's allowing my brain to wander, giving it that space to play, and then coming back with a more clear channel of focus to piece together. And then a lot of it as well is just leaving stuff out and being like, maybe that's a line that I like, but it's not serving the true message, I guess. Yeah.
Something that when you said inner child, when you did the Golden Time 10-minute poem, that like I was listening to that today and it hit me of like, I haven't heard the word Golden Time for 15 years. Well, 10 years at least. And I was like, you kind of spiral me into all this thing of childhood, and you broaden it so that it applies to more than just the classroom. And like, with that, did you just kind of think of this and then just keep going and going and going and create this whole kind of world? Like, how did that one come about?
Yeah, well, thanks. Was that on Spotify that you heard that one? I wasn't sure if anyone had listened to those albums, but obviously they are. Yeah, so like, I think someone had made a tweet. I think this was maybe 5 years ago, and it was like, remember Golden Time? What a thing. And I hadn't thought about it, and I thought, God, and I started to think about the fact that I used to lose my Golden Time, and the way that we we had this points-based reward system using joy at the end of the week. And then I started to think about, it was during a time when, I don't know, it felt like some kind of universal alignment, and I don't know how much I believe in that, but it was during a time when I was really, really struggling to give myself any free time or joy. I had put a lot of pressure on myself to be super productive, and I think a lot of people do, particularly in the world we live in. And I felt like even when I had a day off or a morning off, I was just overcome by like all the ways that I should optimize myself or be productive. And I just started to relate that to those incentives we learn from school, where we have this, we're penalized by losing our ability to play. And that is something that we then internalize as we get older, where we become our own sort of teacher. You know, we put restrictions on ourselves. We say like, oh, if I just manage to get up earlier, then I'll do this, or I haven't done enough, and we become our own sort of self judge. And I'm not saying that Golden Time is the root of that. I just think it's like part of a culture that thinks that we have to earn our play and our joy, rather than it being like the primary focus of our existence. Yeah, and then obviously that one became, so it was a spoken word poem, and then it became my one woman show. So it kind of grew into something bigger, like a story that had more meaning beyond just the poem that you heard. So yeah, and we're hoping to do that show at the Edinburgh Fringe this year. So we'll stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I listened to it twice today. Listened to it once in the morning and once sort of like 2 hours ago. Got goosebumps twice. So that's props there to you. And isn't it so brilliant where when you land on like some sort of metaphor or analogy and it just feels so perfect. And it's like, how can we take some idea about, I don't know, some rule that we had in school as an 8-year-old child, and then that actually encapsulates something so profound about the structure of society as a whole and how it feels to be a human being in this time. And that is the beauty of poetic language to me, that you can have a line of someone's written a line, someone's written one piece of imagery, and yet in those 10 words, there is so much complexity that you apply to it from your own perspective and experience of the world that we can all somehow relate to, but in unique ways. And I think that's why I got goosebumps. I love the feeling of goosebumps when it's a song or it's a performance or whatever it is. To me, there's something divine actually in that, something transcendental. It's like my intellectual mind can't get a grasp on it. And so my body reacts in this way. And I don't know if it's some sort of my frequency, I'm vibrating at a higher frequency or whatever. I don't know what it is, right? But it's something profound. And I loved it. I loved it. And like, do you think that...
Just to chip in.
Go on, Jake.
Just to chip in, what do you think Goosebumps is? Is it like nostalgia, like the body kind of releasing nostalgia through the skin or something?
No, actually...
Well, it's interesting what you said. Oh, sorry.
No, you go, because then I can go into my like boring spiel. But go on.
Well, it's just interesting because I've been thinking about this recently about that experience of something transcendent and kind of we can't intellectually explain. So like whenever I hear, even if I watch a video of a crowd singing in unison, I get goosebumps. Or if I see like people doing the haka, I get goosebumps. And it's something I think that, like, I think science and law and politics is kind of this, it's like a documentation of factual records of the way things are. Whereas the arts is like a record of the emotional world, which can't be just simply written down or in a sort of factual way, or can't be just like, you can't just take a photo of the way things are. It has to be obscured through the prisms of someone's subjectivity. And I think we get these physical reactions to art because it's like something primal within us that can't be explained through just like, simple explanation, is conjured within us. And apparently there's something about like collective encounters where we feel so bodily connected to each other when we're all in a room together or something. And I think it's the same when you feel connected to a song or a piece of art. You're like, something deep within me that I can't really say out loud has been like activated here. I think the Goosebumps is bizarre. It's like my skin knows this before my brain. It's
Yeah, I absolutely love what you've just said there. And for context, before I go into my next ramble, I'm a psychology student. So I try and think about all these things from like theories about what we know about the way the brain is structured and what's going on neurochemically to produce phenomena like Goosebumps. And actually that point about those two ways of looking at the world, I've got a great way of thinking about that I might go into. But on the Goosebumps point first, we'll address that initially. I looked into this, Jake, because I was fascinated by how does when I put on a certain song, within the first 5 seconds, I'm in this state of euphoria. Why is that? What is going on there? And I looked into it, and actually, there's one paper that found that it's a huge release of dopamine in you anticipating reliving a good experience. Because when you listen to a song for the first time and it's a good song that you like, it's this unique, novel, euphoric experience. And when you hear that song again, maybe you haven't heard it for a couple of months or something, you hear it again, your brain recognizes that from somewhere deep, and you get this rush of dopamine and anticipatory neurochemicals that excite you because you're about to relive that great experience. So maybe I'm thinking about it now. This is just me going theoretical from my own personal perspective, but hearing your long form poem today and hearing the term golden time and thinking back to my sort of 8-year-old self, so excited to like play my Nintendo at the end of the week, you maybe tapped into a memory that I hadn't looked at in years. And so the web of that memory began to expand, and I got this big rush of dopamine because in my own mind, I was sent back to being 8-year-old Joel, and I hadn't looked at him and spoke to him in so long. And so that's why I had that euphoric experience, because it just takes you back to a part of a memory web that just been closed off. But yeah, I'll just briefly touch on
I
this.
think there's something.
Go on.
Sorry.
Interject, because I'm
I think
interested.
it's so interesting as well, because a lot of the way I perform feels quite innate, and I guess I've just a lot of the way I perform, I've just kind of come to that. But if I was to look into that from what you said about a kind of nostalgia or a familiarity, a lot of the way I perform is intentionally designed to make you feel like you maybe already know me, or that you are familiar with me, that I'm not talking above you and I'm not talking down to you. I'm like, you're already my pal. Like, we're already talking at a pub or something. It's kind of designed to be soft, but also matter of fact. So maybe that's also something I've done so that people feel instantly like safe and in safe hands. And I guess that also feels like quite nostalgic, maybe. And I guess being Scottish helps because it just sounds trustworthy.
Yeah, I think it's something in your tone, and also immediately introducing a relatable context will get people on side, I think. I mean, maybe that's how it feels to me, I guess. It's like you talked about something that I also experienced, so we have that familiarity and similarity that then I feel like we're on a similar wavelength in a way, and I go along with what you go on to say. But I'll just finish. I mean, Jacob probably knows what's coming here, but I'll just finish up on that point you said about those like two different, I don't know, ways of looking at the world, I guess. And what's great is that I don't think you come from like a psychology background, but what you said in that ramble just pointed to a phenomena that I've been so like fixated by over the last few months, which is the brain is split into two hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. They have actually quite different ways of looking at or attending to the world, and I'll try and put this as simple and as digestible as I can. But basically, the left hemisphere views the world as a compilation of like detached objects that we can like manipulate and grasp, whereas the right hemisphere sees the world in its full context. It doesn't see just I don't know, the mug of tea that I've got on my laptop here. The right hemisphere will see that this nourishes my soul and hydrates me and gives me, I don't know, it allows me, my brain to function and all those kind of things, whereas my left hemisphere just sees an object that my hand can pick up and drink from, if that makes sense. And it's the right hemisphere that is associated with our confrontation with the divine and the transcendental, and it's the right hemisphere that appreciates artwork. So I just wanted to add that on, because you've basically exposed a psychology theory, but without using the jargon and terminology, which is, I love it. I love it when I meet people from different backgrounds and they say things that I've been thinking about. It's amazing. So thank you.
Well, this is why we all need to collaborate across the sciences and the arts, because together we could be unstoppable. But there's just not enough funding.
Yeah.
It's also kind of like, thing with poetry is you've got like double and triple entendres, and the left hemisphere only sees the sentence as it is, whereas the right hemisphere is able to see the double or the triple entendre. So you see deeper into that and multiple interpretations. That's why like poetry it's a fascinating art form. It combines a lot of like themes and music, but imagery, and it's one of a kind.
Well, because that's the interesting thing is, like, we're not all musicians. That's a skill that people have developed and learned. But we all know how to speak, and most of us know how to write. So it's something that we all interact with language. We all use it. So as a poet, you are taking the thing that people use every single day in their own way, and you are like recontextualizing it and giving people, I hope, another way to use their language. So like if you can give people a new neural pathway to understand maybe their inner child or their sensitivity with, I mean, as British people, we use little turns of phrase and we use poetry every day, we use metaphors, we use wee things that like when you say like, oh, we were having a chin wag, that's poetry that we're using. It's silly little ditties that kind of, as well being from Glasgow, like the vernacular unites people from regional places with words and turns of phrase, the same with like Cockney rhyming slang or whatever. But it's kind of like, if you can take the way people talk and use that, I don't really, for me anyway, I don't really believe in using like incredibly sort of lofty, overcomplicated language, because I sometimes think that people that do that don't actually know what it is they're trying to say, and they're using that as to kind of obscure their lack of intent. But yeah, it's just one of those art forms that's funny because we all write, and it's not like dancing or doing gymnastics or whatever. It's like it's something that I guess that also means that a lot of people think that they can be a poet when their work is shite. I shouldn't say that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We often live in a world, well, we do live in a world of implicit meanings, as in like not obvious meanings. That's what sarcasm is. That's what jokes are, right? That's what imagery is.
That's what dreams are. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
metaphors come from dreams. Like if you think about it, our dreams take the objects and the people and the memories that we have and turn them into metaphors. It's like, why was I dreaming about my teeth falling out? Or why was I dreaming about falling down a staircase? And your brain has literally linked the stuff that you see every day with your emotions. It's like it's created a metaphor inside your
Yeah.
head. And if we can try and decode them, we'd probably understand our fears, our desires better.
And this
Maybe.
is why, and me and Jacob have talked a lot about this kind of stuff on different podcast episodes, but this is why I think the world of metaphor and of mythology and of story and poetry, I think they are maybe more fundamental aspects of what it means to be a human being than this kind of decontextualized scientific objective world that, I don't know, we're kind of led to believe is what things are. Like why are a lot of our internal thoughts and feelings and dreams and inclinations and desires, they're not really like broken down and scientific and digestible. It's all like emotional noise and imagery and metaphor and story. I mean, your life is a story fundamentally. It's not like a decontextualized sequence of days that you just live out. No, you see yourself as a character. You have plot lines. You have the story develops in different ways, and your character develops, and you go through different all the emotions on the human spectrum, and like that's why, and it actually upsets me when I see, in a way, and I don't know if you agree with me on this or whether I'm just chatting shit, but I feel like we're moving away from that side of life. Like things like religion not being appreciated as much, or like art not being appreciated as much, and I just feel like we're getting very fixated on this left hemisphere, like make money, buy material things, that
Yeah.
philosophy for life, when we have less appreciation for things like imagery and art and the transcendental, because it's been associated with religion that people just think is a load of fiction that people stupidly believe in.
Yeah.
But no, it runs so much deeper than that.
Yeah. Or it's something people perceive as a bit woo-woo and a bit like hippie, and I think that to be able to talk across the people that exist in the left and the right hemisphere, to be able to connect with them, you have to combine the real material reality. So like I've got this poem about like my younger brother and how we went from kind of hating each other as kids to like having this more like this beautiful friendship, but it was kind of like this journey from hate to love. But it's set in his car driving back from getting a Chinese takeaway, and like that familiarity of it being in one place, just that simple image, but then through the car we kind of almost like we're driving through our entire history. And you almost have to have like one foot in reality and then another foot in that more spiritual memory place, that sort of unspoken realm to be able to like get to people. But I also think like, and obviously what is becoming more and more of a sort of fascist uptick of, you know, politicians and stuff, art has always been something that has been very threatening to them because it's like sort of there's so much freedom and there's so much you know, you can't really intercept it in the same way that you could with other kind of movements, I guess. And I think art always prevails in like places where we feel like things are getting hyper consumerist, and I think it's really what people turn to in these like dire times. I do have this faith that like art will prevail. Like it's what, you know, it's like you said, like the stories, you know, the artists, like they're the ones that have written, you know, the films and the music and the TV shows and the, you know, the things that we hold on to that make us feel human and connected. I think those people are like, I don't know. I have a faith in the essential goodness of artists, that they're not going to all become AI generated like, yeah, oligarchs or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right about having to. I kind of like the fact that this weird abstract stuff we're talking about is so grounded in the mundane. You know, that poem that you wrote about your relationship with your brother, it being a drive from a Chinese takeaway, is so nice because there are such mundane moments in life that we go through. But if you apply them through a certain perspective, there is something so profound in it. Whether it's, you know, a conversation with your mum or something you see on the train, or, you know, I see something I don't want to say I struggle with because that makes it sound very negative, but something I get overwhelmed by a lot is when I'm in public and I see an emotion on somebody's face, and I know that there's so much like life and conscious experience that they're going through that's just
Mhm.
like put across in that surface level. I don't even have to speak to them. I just see them and I get this nugget of
Mm.
like what's really going on in their internal reality that I can just never have access
Yep.
to. And that's going on
Yeah.
all around us all of the time. Which is, yeah, like
Why you need the like noise cancelling headphones on. Like I find it so hard to be out in public and not be like this Bluetooth speaker just connecting to other people's feelings. And I think that's what I mean when I say there are sensitive ones among us who cannot not feel the emotions of other people as if it's kind of like a bodily sensation. Like if I can recognize that a couple are in a fight or that there's someone uncomfortable, or like I just can't stop noticing, and some people just don't feel that way, and for me that, you know, people would say that's an attention deficit, but I think it's like a gift of attention, because I just sometimes think that if we lived in a small community, you know, in the 1800s, not the 1800s, say like the 1400s in rural Scotland, there would be a different type of brain within this ecosystem of brains, and there would be someone that was, the majority of brains would be, you know, kind of what we describe as neurotypical, and more kind of designed to be the kind of the builders and the workers and the people that procreated and kept the human race and our community alive. And then there would be the ones that are more potentially what we would think are autistic, which is someone who has a much higher level of pattern recognition and ability to, you know, have a really like specific awareness of sensory information and logistics, and can see things for what they are rather than what they have been warped by the sort of mass group. And I think sometimes what people think in autistic people is them being socially inept is actually their brain saying, no, don't comply, because then you won't see things clearly. And then for an ADHD person, I think it's someone that has a hypersensitivity to emotion stimulation. So in a community, they would be more of a healer, more of a storyteller. You know, they believe that a lot of the women that were like burned at the stake for being witches would have probably just been neurodivergent women who had a connection to the beyond, but actually it was probably just that their brain was designed in a more sensitive way, that they could feel people's emotions, they could feel what people needed, and that was just like you said, that awareness of other people at all times. But then religious factions would have just thought that they're being possessed by the devil or something, you know. And sometimes when I feel really low and I feel like I can't do things, and I'm my room's really messy, or like I can't function properly in social situations, I almost just say to myself, imagine I was in that small village. My brain would have a purpose. It wouldn't be a deficit. It would have a reason. This modern world that we live in is not fit for purpose for sensitive people, and what they're for, which is to kind of help people and connect, you know. Sorry, that was a very long ramble, but
No, it's great. I really like what you're saying. I want to point out on the sensitive poem. There was this comment that Jill read to me, and I think
Mm.
it was really like quite profound. It says, "I think of people like plants. There are there are strong, and this there are some that are strong and seem to weather anything. Some are delicate and have nuanced healing powers. Our society expects all the plants to thrive together in one single regimented environment. It will never happen. So many get left behind." I should probably credit the person, but we don't have the credit written
I
down.
haven't done
But
that.
it's such a
I've just made the note.
we'll do it in the show notes, yeah.
it's such a good way to think of humans and people that feel things differently, and people that are the sensitive ones, and you have people's own talents and the way that they see the world. And I mean, I'm kind of interested, like, how we're gonna. It seems like combining both the left and the right hemispheres, so that something's digestible to everyone, but they still understand art. Is like
Mm.
the kind of the equilibrium, the perfect. Yeah, I have a kind of question for you as well, Joel. Like, if you were to sort of integrate both the left and right hemispheres, what do you think kind of would happen, and like what does that look like?
Hmm.
Mm.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's in the nature of forming a society that you need a level of conformity just for things to function. If everyone just followed their like impulsive desires in the present moment all the time, we wouldn't be able to have amazing things that we do have. You know, our
Mm.
society wouldn't have given all of us like the homes that we do and the access to food and resources that we have, and the fact that there are things such as creative jobs, and like that's all the fruits of this amazing society and culture that we are just a small, what's the right word, we get to access, right? And we didn't choose that. We're sort of just born into this life. We stand on the shoulder of giants of the many societies before us that have put this together for all their corruption and turmoil and war, and somehow we've ended up in the 21st century, like sat on a riverside talking about art and stuff. It's wild. But
Mm.
in that, there is a line that you can cross where now there's narratives of conformism that limit people. And it's like, well, where in a lot of these discussions, Jacob, that it's all about trying to figure out where the line is. And no one really has a clear defined answer for that. Like, how much do we need people to be the same, and how much do we need to encourage people's differences? Because I
Mm.
think maybe in the world we live in now in the West, we've gone too far beyond the line of there are certain narratives about how we want people to behave or how we perceive people with different mental inclinations and interests and all of that. So maybe
Mm.
it's I don't know. Maybe I think it'd be great to live in a world where we don't need everyone to follow some regimented narrative, and we can celebrate people's differences. And we are moving that way. I believe we are moving that way. But what I love about this metaphor that this person has used is the bit about so many people getting left behind. Like, how much potential and creative potential is there in people that just don't express it because they don't feel like the world's going to accept them for who they really are. I mean, I relate to that on a very, very core level. But what do you think, Kate?
I guess, like, yeah, it's hard because there's never been another kind of status quo that we've known of there being another way of society working. But I think what we're seeing is society verging towards something that is so unprecedented, which is um, the sort of hyper capitalism of it all, where we're not treating each other, at anyone, like a human. It's like we're all this kind of like robot machine, and everyone's going to suffer under being that disconnected from their own humanity. And what I feel like the ideal, because basically I trained to be a neuro inclusivity advocate through working with young people who were neurodivergent, and so that's kind of where I learned a lot about the kind of ecosystem of brains. And what I know is that if you find ways for people to thrive rather than feel like they're at a deficit, we've all felt it when we've felt like we're truly part of a community. And I don't know whether it's been in a job or it's been through a club, but you know what, you might have someone who's like 60 years old, you might have someone who's a teenager, you're all from different backgrounds, but for some reason, it's like, when you watch The Traitors, have you watched The Traitors?
I've seen it before, yeah.
I've heard of it, yeah.
So, well, in that show, I mean, yes, it's called The Traitors, and they have to be quite treacherous towards each other, but they really try and amplify the fact that this is a group of people from all over the UK, all different races, backgrounds, different types of brain. There's definitely people that present as neurodivergent on that show. And what you see is that through being together, through supporting each other, through understanding that different people operate differently, and showing acceptance, the group starts to work together for the greater good, which is upholding the community. And I think we know that when we feel valued as a person, we don't feel judged, we don't feel criticized, we don't feel like we're being leveled against each other. We really want to like protect and hold each other. It's like the way we do when we're young children, when we're in class as maybe 5-year-olds. And I know this from working with super young kids as well. They don't hold any malice towards each other. They're not trying to be in competition. That's something engineered in them by adults. A lot of them are so unbelievably supportive and kind and respectful of each other's differences, that you see this little community of tiny wee kids just like working really in such a lovely way. There's no judgment, and that is something that we learn. And I think when you see a child who is autistic or ADHD just treated with like utter respect, their needs are being met because they're being understood for their different way of operating. Of course, we need to we can't accept violence, or we can't accept like unacceptable behavior that disrupts and upsets other children. But I think that the way we place rules and limits on people from such an early age about the way they innately are is really hindering to people who could be so actively involved in our communities and so like vital. Because I think what ends up happening is when you make people feel shit, they either end up internalizing all that pain. So you might have a lot of neurodivergent people who end up becoming addicts, or going down a really dark path, or that they end up wanting to master and dominate everyone, like Elon Musk. It's like they have to rise above and not be part of a community, become actively the oppressor. So yeah, it almost sounds too simplistic to say that like radical care and community, I think, is what is needed to unite the hemispheres. But I think what stems from a lot of tyranny and corruption is a deep, deep lack of love from your society, and feeling, we will go to such great lengths to write a feeling of being unloved. It might be like Donald Trump had his dad, saying horrible things to him as a wee boy, and that's still ringing around his brain when he tries to expel all illegal immigrants. It's that little childhood core of being unloved that makes people just want to just fuck everything up, basically. So yeah, I don't really have an answer, but that was a kind of tangent, I guess.
No, that was a great ramble. And I'll maybe go on off my own tangent now, but then I'll bring it back to a question that I did want to ask you. And I can relate to what you said in a small way. I was born with cerebral palsy. I don't know if you heard of it. So I've got mild cerebral palsy in my legs, which means like I walk a bit funny and I have to use like a day wheelchair to go like longer distances and stuff. And like growing up with that as a kid in school, especially, I do understand. Obviously, I'm not like, I don't have a learning difficulty or autism and things like that, but I do relate to the feeling of being different to everybody else in like a classroom environment, or like I was the only kid in a wheelchair in the school and things like that. And that feeling of like people can treat you nicely, but you always are the one that's left out from the PE sessions, or you're always the one where people just have to, they're kind of stepping on eggshells to speak to you, like staff members and other parents and all this kind of stuff. There's this of like, oh, they don't want to make a wrong move in how they interact and all this kind of stuff. And I only really made the significant movements in accepting my disability when I joined a wheelchair basketball club, which is now like what I'm lucky enough to do for a living, is I play that sport as my job. But like when I joined that club when I was 8 years old, I saw kids, you know, that were double amputees or that were paraplegics. They were paralyzed from their chest down, all this kind of stuff that was the first time I properly felt like, whoa, there's a community of people like me. And that was then kind of a springboard for like all my development throughout my like late childhood and teens and like to where I am today. And I think about, well, what is that journey? Yes, it's a confrontation with, or a joining of a new community, an emergence of a new community. But a lot of it is about my own self-image and how I perceive myself, and actually me accepting myself as a member of this society despite my differences, and actually that my differences can be celebrated. And it kind of links to a quote of yours that you captioned in one of your Instagram posts that I just wanted to read out and then get you to kind of elaborate on. You said these two lines that pointed out to me. You said, "Sometimes I don't want to be perceived. I just want to be a ball of nerve endings, feeling, sensing, not thinking. I want to step outside the house feeling entirely neutral, neither impressed, depressed, or fazed by the way I look, my face, hair, skin." Now, like, that was so powerful to me, especially the bit about going out into the world, not as this kind of persona or anything about your physical appearance, but just as like the organism, as the human being, as the soul, or whatever way you want to think about it. So could you maybe touch on, I don't know, your thoughts on that kind of self-image point, and how maybe some lessons you've learned around that? Because that seems to be a bit of a theme through bits of your work as well.
Yeah, I think the self is something that is like has really been my kind of primary preoccupation, which sounds a little bit self-indulgent. But I really appreciate what you said about your cerebral palsy, because it's like, as a child, before you maybe inherited the idea that you were different, or that you were disabled by your culture or by your society, you wouldn't have necessarily thought that there was anything particularly different or strange or wrong about you. You know, it's you learn that through other people. That is something that, you know, I know that when I was a little girl, I probably really thought I was really cool and like thought I was really funny, and it was other people making me feel, other people's limitations of understanding of me, that made me feel like I had to start to you know, quiet myself or dilute myself. But it never came from within originally. But because we can't really remember a lot of our childhoods, we can't separate when it starts to become innate and when it's a developmental self-hatred. And yeah, I think sometimes for me as a woman, so much of my self, you know, worth rides on my appearance, and that's not something that I enjoy. It's just something that is a fact of life. Like the kind of currency of the way we look as women is, I believe, a lot more intense than what men go through. I know that men have a lot of body image stuff being thrown at them at the moment, but I guess the sort of intensity of like makeup and our bodies and the way that we're perceived sexually from a young age as well. Yeah, and sometimes I know that when I feel depressed is when I've been wearing that kind of, it's like an avatar where you're like, I'm almost assembling this persona, like you said, like trying to look cool or trying to look interesting. And sometimes I don't want to be seen as that attempt. I just want to experience and be unwatched, and not feel like I'm being kind of like hyper analyzed. And no one really is going to be hyper analyzing me, but I will be watching me from the outside, you know. um it's that self image that we're stalked by, is that looking at ourselves. And I think the times when we transcend or feel deeply connected is when we have no concept of what we look like or what we um are behaving like. You know, I think that's why when you're listening to music or in a crowd with people and you get goosebumps, is because you have connected to, yeah, like a higher realm. You don't care about the way you look. You don't care about these superficial sort of artificial, you know, presentations of self. It's just pure feeling. And I think when you, yeah, I think I have a lot of days where I just want to leave the house without that self perception. But it's definitely gotten better. I think I used to have periods of my life where I really struggled to sort of go out and socialize, and I think now that I've become a lot more, I have a lot more I don't think it's self-love, I think it's self-acceptance. I think there's a difference. I try not, it's like when I say I want to be neutral, I don't want to be obsessed with the way I look, and I don't want to hate it. I just want to be like, that's my face, that's my body. It's a functional, healthy instrument to be able to live, you know. I don't need to love it, I just need to accept it. So I think that's what I'm definitely getting better at as I grow up. Yeah.
I think I agree with you that the solution to a negative self image would to kind of be a detachment of self image, or to remove your self image, like remembering that I'm just a finite being in an infinite universe, and just let go of this image that I've constructed in my head. I think that would really help.
Yeah, it's like if someone says, "Oh God, I feel like I'm so ugly at the moment." I think it does feel like an instinct to be like, "Of course, you look beautiful, you look amazing." But what we need is to actually, yeah, like you said, detach from the idea that our whole day needs to be defined by the way we look. Or it's so hard because so much of the way we judge each other and date each other, it's all based on appearance. I get that, but I think the way that it takes up so much of our brain space, yeah, it limits us from what should be us just trying to like consume all the meaning and all the experience we can before we die, which could be
And I
any
think
day,
it's
you know.
tough, especially for girls as well. Like, I don't mind walking out the door not looking amazing, but I think girls have a lot of pressure, definitely.
Well, there's always something new, and I think once, for me as well, to that point as well, it's like if I can detach, um, see that these systems that are trying to get me to have Botox, lip filler, you know, uh, take what's the what's the drug that people are taking to lose weight?
Ozempic.
Um, yep, you know, all of that is like conditioning that I'm seeing every day, and I could either try and do that. I could either try and do this like insane health regimen. I could buy all this makeup. I could buy all these clothes, hair products. You know, the admin of it is intense. Or I could try and be like, detach myself and be like, that is something that is used to take all my money and control me into submission, and I can play that game, and it will be endless and finite, and I'll never be satisfied. Or I can stop, and I mean, I'm not free of it, but I'm definitely not, you know, I used to be pretty much addicted to buying clothes, and it was just because there was that void of needing to update myself, not feeling comfortable with just what I had, and that capitalist machine has really latched onto my insecurity and then promotes more stuff to me. And I think that's the kind of the biggest danger of our times, is that rampant capitalism will not let you stop ever improving yourself. And the most radical thing you can do is rest and is resist through ceasing action and just going, I'm actually okay with who I am. I'm not an unfinished project. I'm fine, you know. But it's obviously impossible to do. But it's good to try, you know.
Yeah, like something I've been thinking about as you guys were speaking there is I find it really interesting, this kind of journey arc that I perceive that people go through, where as a child it's kind of like you have this intrinsic knowing of who you are, or maybe it's like you're just a big ball of potential. So it doesn't matter who you are when you're 3 years old or 4 years old, because you're just so fresh to the world and everything's new and exciting. But then as you develop into later childhood and adolescence, then you're stricken with this immense dose of self-consciousness. And you begin to look outside of yourself for who you should be or who you are. You pick up things that resonate with you and things that don't. You see trends that you desire to be a part of and you follow them. You have social groups that you feel this deep desire to be accepted by, whether that's at school or in your family or your parents' approval or whatever. It's like we become this Frankenstein monster amalgamation of ideas that we've seen outside of ourselves that we think would be good to be. And then we come to a point where we realize that that's not bringing us joy. Like you said, it's this constant cycle that doesn't end, and it's fundamentally inauthentic. And then you enter into a new chapter of trying to figure out who's actually there underneath all those like lines of paint that you've painted on from things outside of yourself. Like, what's the core that all these sections of the Frankenstein's monster that have been added on? Who are you when you were a child? Like, what's that essence? What's that spirit that is truly you? And when I've had conversations with my elders, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s about, when they began accepting themselves in life, or what brings them joy in life, and why they're just so happy with what we as younger people would consider like mundane or unexciting lives. And it's because they say, well, I kind of know who I am now and what I want. And I see this arc then, I kind of create that into a narrative, like you're a child and you're your pure essence. And then through your youth, you kind of pick up all these images and ideas that are outside of you and paint them over yourself. And then there's this switch whenever that moment happens, however old you are, where you then begin to peel back layers again and you remember who you were when you were a kid. And there's something so beautiful in that, I think.
Yeah. It's like the years of unlearning. I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm 26, so I feel like I had the years of masking and putting on facades, and then I think when my prefrontal cortex developed to 25, that's when I started to be like, who am I at my core? And then also the things that I would have thought were cringe when I was like 22, I'm like, I fucking love those things. Like, that was the childhood wonder that you have. And when you start realizing that you can just like whatever you want, and it's one of the purest things to do, is like the little films, little YouTube videos, little games, like that is pure joy. Or and I look at my gran, and she's so happy to sit and embroider for hours without the radio on, without the TV on. She's just so happy to do that. And I'm like, I could never. But I think once you know yourself, you're like, life becomes so much more full, and you don't need these like insane experiences or this insane dopamine high just to like exist. You're like, little things are enough, which is a hard to like learn, but I think it does happen.
Well, reality is always... Sorry, Jake, can I just add this final point before you go? Like, I feel like the reality is always trying to push things for you to care about onto you. And when I think about my granddad as an example, who's like a big role model for me and has been like my primary father figure through life, I think the reason he's such a chill guy, and he said this to me, is he just got to a point where he realized what he actually cared about. Because you could ask anyone, like, what do you care about? And they'll give you an answer. But do they really know whether they actually care about that thing, or it's because they have this desire to be accepted, or this self-consciousness that they're trying to overcome, or this insecurity, or it's some advert that they saw, or some celebrity that they want to, that's a role model to them and they want to be like, that they've just had these cares imprinted on them by the world. But when you know what you actually care about, now I don't really know what that feels like because I'm so young and I'm not at the stage of life like my granddad is, but I feel like that would be such a relief. It's like all the need to try
Hmm.
and find what you care about and decide what you care about no longer matters, and you can just care about what you care about, and that's so beautiful. But go on, Jake, what were you going to say?
I was going to ask sort of similar lines of how do you practically let go of the self-image?
Mm. I mean, I think my creativity for me has always been maybe one of the only things that's kind of like stayed steady throughout my kind of maybe very tumultuous like adolescence um and when I'm in a writing space, when I'm feeling free, I feel like I've hit the kind of subconscious flow state where I'm not aware, I'm not trying to be anyone else but access like what's within. But I think yeah, just I think being in community, I think for a long time I kind of felt like I had to be a bit of a sort of lone agent, and I think um, from having difficult social groups at school and stuff, I didn't see the value so much in having like friends that I really like nurtured those relationships. And in the past couple of years, I've realized how to have friends that like I feel truly connected to and truly understood by. Um, I when I'm with them, I'm so up out of my self perception and I just want to connect. And when I'm having conversations like this as well, I'm like, I'm not sitting inside how I'm being perceived, which is ironic because I'm literally like on camera being recorded. But when I have good, like interesting connection, it I feel really like, yeah, I'm like, this is what it's about. This is what humanity is. I don't know. Um, so yeah, art and community, I think, have been like the things that I will look to, and I will try and I think bring people that sense of connection again after feeling. I think it is when we spend too long watching ourselves, we just become so depressed and so disconnected and isolated and um yeah. What about you guys? How do you get rid of that?
I I think I just some what sparked my head before you go, Joe. I think I do have to work on this because it's definitely present. I think you're absolutely right with community because when you start contributing what you're doing towards a community, you're no longer contributing that to yourself, and that and as the relationship example, your goal with that is to just have the best conversation, is not to lift yourself up. And
Hmm.
I also think there's lots of links with why religious people are so nice, like um, stereotypically, um, because they're everything they do for God. So I think for me the solution would be to find the right community and set your aims aligned with them.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's like
like.
leading with.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll go.
Well,
Sorry.
I think yeah.
Oh,
You go first.
I'll go. I'll go. I like
Cool.
bits of what both of you guys said, and I might try and just put them together. But it's an interesting question, isn't it? Should your life be about you? That's an interesting question. Should it be about you? Because you are you. You experience the world through you. But actually, Kate, you talked about flow state, which is an idea that I love, especially from like from a psychological perspective. That when you're in a state of flow, when you get into that brainwave state, your self consciousness drastically decreases. And that's interesting because flow is actually a very meaningful experience. And I think there
Hmm.
is a link there between a profound sense of meaning and this dissolving of self consciousness, because whatever you're doing becomes bigger than you. It's not about you anymore. It's not about you as an individual. So, like, where do I get the most flow state in my life? Well, when I'm writing for content or I'm speaking on the podcast like this, it's not about Joel Clifton. It's about big ideas that are bigger than me and that can provide value in this conversation to us, but also to the wider people that might listen to it. Or when I'm playing a basketball
Hmm.
game, for me, the team, we become one organism. and our goal is to
Mm-hmm.
achieve this objective of winning this game. So it's not about Joel Clifton as the individual. I become the basketball game. I become the basketball player. It's bigger than me. It's about us as a team and us as an organization and winning, and this primal like us versus them warlike mentality that goes into sport and things like this. Like, I think there's something to that. If you can,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this is something that a lot of people talk about when they have children, for example. That's when your life isn't about you anymore. There's someone in your life that's more important than you to you, and how there's this
Mm-hmm.
profound sense of not caring about things like your self-image or how you're perceived by the world, because your child is the most important thing in your reality then. So,
Yeah.
and like you said, Jake, with the religious thing, if life is about this higher power, this higher consciousness, this divine being, this divine way of being, then it's not about you as an individual. And I know it's a paradoxical way of looking at things, but maybe the best way to feel in life and the best way to approach life is to not focus on you at all. And then as a byproduct, you'll feel better. It's paradoxical, but it's interesting.
It's
Go on, Kate, because I interrupted you. Go.
no, it's okay. It's just fascinating because so I would argue that the best way to show up for people and be part of that organism, be the best parent, be the best teammate, is to start from within. If you have settled your scores and if you have done your work and if you have focused on yourself, but I guess it's not, yeah, it's not in that egotistical, like, I want to be better than everyone else. It's like, I want to heal, or I want to focus on why I do things, how I can be the most like kind person, how I can not use my past traumas in order to inflict discomfort on other people. And I think if you really get to that place within yourself, like they say with doulas, like the women, the people that help women give birth and through the birthing process, that their like primary piece of knowledge that they have is that they need to be a really comfortable presence from within. Because if you sit in a room with a pregnant woman and you're quite like erratic and a bit uncomfortable and a bit anxious, she'll start to feel that, because pregnant women are like they like absorb people's energy because they're trying to protect their child, you know. So the doulas always say that if you start from within, if you become this really calm, really soft, really stable like person who, yes, things might happen to, and you might get, you know, you might have grief, you might have anxiety, but if you can still be that essential core where you're like, anything that happens to me, it won't rock my sense of self to the point where I can't show up and care for people. And so I think if we feed ourselves, it's kind of like the put your own air, but put your own life jacket on first kind of thing. Like, you have to. I couldn't be a good friend to my mates if I was so in my head that everything that they said to me I would perceive as a criticism or something. You know, I have to be okay first, that I can give them good advice and I can be receptive to their energy. So I think it's maybe the purpose of life is that we can get to a place of self-knowledge to the point where our capacity to love and to connect makes us feel just as settled and as comfortable and as happy as, I don't know, achieving something purely for our own self. Because I don't think whenever I have achieved something, if I've done a big show or I've been on stage, I never feel quite fulfilled. Like, I don't come off stage feeling like, the fulfillment comes from the people that I've worked with, that feeling that we've done something together, the like being in the bar and hugging each other and being like, we fucking did that together. It doesn't come from this sense that, oh my god, everyone thinks I'm amazing. I think that's a finite resource, and I think any artist or singer or musician will know that feeling of, it doesn't come from being like, I'm amazing. The feeling comes from being united with the other people around you. And I think when I've tried to use achievements or success through my art in order to make me feel good, it's left me feeling lonely and isolated. I think we have to fight. We have to heal ourselves through community. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with there being another side to things, and I think the answer is to put these things together and do both, hopefully at the same time. So when you're on the stage, and you're providing value for yourself, your confidence, your career, your experience, but you're also providing value for all those people that took the time to come and listen to you. And it's kind of like a balance between, say, if you've got £1 and you can help a homeless person, but you could turn that £1, do something better with it, and then be able to help more homeless people, which would seem more right. But I think, like, I think the answer is to try and do both kind of at the same time, so that you're able to be able to deliver something of more worth in the future while still be giving worth in the present sort of day.
Mm. Yeah, I like it. I mean, the way I think about it, just from what you were saying there, because it's a brilliant point, and it makes me think of Carl Jung, who was one of the great first psychoanalysts. He said he stressed so importantly in his work that for someone to counsel someone through their psychological disquiet and any pathology, they have to have done so much self work to be able to do that
Mm-hmm.
effectively. And so many therapists get qualifications and get these titles of they're a therapist or a counselor. But if they haven't done the self work themselves, they're going to attach to certain things that their client says or have this certain perspective that means they can't really help somebody navigate through that journey themselves. That's the thought that came to me as you were speaking. And then I go, okay, well, maybe the process is you have to sort of confront and deal with your own demons and have some level of stability and tranquility in yourself so that you can give yourself up to the world, to give yourself up
Mm-hmm.
to the people around you, to provide value to your community through your work, and your work becomes bigger than you, or to submit yourself to something divine, whether that be God or nature or creativity or whatever the way you want to think about it, or whether it's falling in love. That's fundamentally a process of giving yourself up to another person or a family or a friendship group. And it's that self acceptance and then self sacrifice that I think is something so fundamental to the way human beings are, and that's the divine story that we see in so many religious texts about self sacrifice for the greater good, and that's a great way to be in the world. It's not easy by any means, bloody hell, but it's something good to think about and to aim for. Now, Jake, I'm conscious that we're sort of coming to the end of time. Do you have anything specific you want to go through before we sort of summarize and end?
No, I think that was I think it was a good note to end. I think there's a good kind of lesson in kind of how the purpose comes from doing it to your doing it for your craft rather than doing it for yourself. And that's something that you might have thought of before, because you might have thought it'd be about kind of your own achievements all stacked on top of each other when you kind of look back at your life on your deathbed. But I think that, yeah, the real answer is to do it for the craft, do it for the higher
Higher
form.
purpose. Yeah. Yeah, well, Jung always talked about the self of the times and the self of the deep, or I think it was the spirit of the times and the spirit of the deep. And I do think about that a lot. I think, you know, I've somehow managed to get a following online for my poems. Will that be something that will matter to me when I die? Will this app created by a billionaire, or can it be that I have the ability to speak to people in a way that I never had before, and give them a little sense of safety or solace through what I believe is my purpose, which is to talk to people and to connect with them through my art form. Yeah, and it's like I'm constantly grappling with those, because so much of being an artist now is having to create content, and that feels like you have to guess see it as a means to an end, because it's like, if I want people to hear what I say, if I want to be able to do more gigs, if I want to be able to live and have a job, I need to be putting this stuff on the internet, which is also this kind of perception, this spectacle machine, like we talked about. It's really hard not to look at myself from the outside when I'm putting myself online a lot, but I have to see it as part of my purpose, which is to offer my words and my insights and to connect. But it is really complicated when the only way to do that is on this flat screen, image based platform. So I'm not quite sure how to like set all those parts of myself, but um, I'll keep trying.
Well, I think you're doing a good job because you're not doing it like it comes across as you're doing it for the value of the poetry and not for the algorithm, and that's allows people to like it's fast allowed us to connect to you. I wanted to ask if people want to find you, where should they go?
Yeah, so my Instagram is kate.ireland, and then I run a sort of storytelling cabaret event called Blether, which is at Blether Forever on Instagram. And yeah, I have my album on Spotify and some live recordings. Just my name, Kate Ireland. You should find it. Yeah, so I'll hopefully be doing my solo show in Edinburgh this year, and I've got some other gigs coming up. Uh, so yeah, most of that will get posted on my Instagram. My website is currently down, so I'm rebuilding it at the moment. So that'll be another place that people can follow along.
Amazing. We've got like our last question usually is just to hand the mic over, because to anything that you wanted to say or any message you wanted to give, because
Oh God.
while we don't have the big following right now, this will be immortalized by internet platforms.
Oh God. What if I'm as if I'm talking to the
Well,
internet?
To whoever, to me, to Jacob, to God, to the people out there, to yourself, anything.
Oh,
But don't overthink it now.
mm. Well, full transparency, I've had quite a shit day, and I've been feeling quite low, quite insecure. I've had some uh, relationship stuff come up from the past, and it's been hard. And I think, if you feel pulled under and you feel like there's kind of no escape, you can't see the wood from the trees, I think social connection, having this conversation, I haven't really thought about what's been going on, this whole time. I've just been enjoying learning, and I think curiosity and learning and meeting new people is always going to be the antidote to stress and anxiety and depression. And I think if you're, yeah, there's always sometimes. My dad told me this thing. Actually, I have a visual cue for this. So once when I was going through a hard time, my dad sent me through this Harold helicopter from, I think it's Thomas the Tank Engine, maybe. Yeah, it's got the little face. And he said that if you're ever in a bad spot, you have to just imagine helicoptering up 6 months, a year into the future, and knowing that this point in your life will be a memory and it will be hindsight, and you will have grown and you will have perspective. Nothing is permanent, and everything isn't moving in a straight line either. You're not just like starting off here and you'll become your optimum self. Things happen in cycles. Like I might have a really good month, and then next month I might struggle with something that I struggled with as a teenager, as a child. Things come back around, and I think if you allow yourself and you give yourself compassion for the way you might feel insecure, and the way you might drop down, and the way you might feel jealous of people, and the way you might feel bitter, if you allow that to pass through you and honor it and say, that's how I feel, I maybe understand why, or I maybe need to do a bit more research about this, I maybe need to write it down, I maybe need to talk to someone. But if you honor it rather than distraction, rather than running away, rather than taking loads of drugs or buying loads of shit, or you know being cruel to yourself, if you honor it and sit with it, and know that you'll be able to fly into distance, and things might be different, I think that's like a good thing to hang on to. Yeah, I don't know if that's the kind of thing that was helpful.
That was really nice. That was really, really nice. Said like a true poet. Thank you
Cool.
so much. Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I think your work is powerful, and it's providing value in the world, value that the world's screaming out for. So And thanks for sharing that as well about your day. You know, I mean, that didn't come across at all. So thank you so much, and thanks everyone for listening.
If I've got, I might try and put